Welcome. We are about to start the PowerPoint presentation provided by New York State that is mandated for all New York State employees and school districts to participate in. The presentation is on the annual Restraint, Seclusion, Timeout, and Understanding Behavior and De-escalation training. We are going to go through it. It is going to be a lot of school law on certain topics, and then we're also going to go through a portion that gives some very brief descriptions of behavior and also some de-escalation techniques that you can use on a daily basis to be successful in your classroom setting. So here we go. There are some regulations that we're going to go through over the next quite a few slides. So 8 NYCRR 19.5 establishes a uniform guideline prohibiting the use of corporal punishment, aversive interventions and seclusions, and authorizing the limited use of timeout and physical restraints in schools to address student behaviors. On July 17, 2023, the Board of Regents adopted a series of amendments to Parts 100 and 200 of the Regulations of the Commissioner to Education to ensure student safety during all instances of physical intervention. Amendments went into effect August 2, 2023. Restraint definitions. Physical restraint. A personal restraint that immobilizes or reduces the ability of a student to move their arms, legs, body, and head freely. It does not include a physical escort, or a brief physical contact and/or redirection to promote student safety, calm or comfort a student, prompt or guide a student when teaching a skill or assisting a student in completing a task, or for other similar purposes. That means, yes, you can walk their hand going down the hall. Yes, if you wanted to, you could do hand-over-hand writing with a student to assist them in doing their jobs. Can you put your arm around a kid on their shoulder and walk them down the hall because they need to get to the office safely? You sure can. Okay. Prone restraint. That is a physical or mechanical restraint while a student is in a face-down position. Prone restraint is prohibited. That is 100% prohibited. There is no CPI physical restraint that is ever in the prone position. Physical escort. A temporary touching or holding of a student's hand, wrist, arm, shoulder, or back for the purpose of inducing a student who is acting out to walk to a safe location. That does not mean picking up or anything like that. That is just a simple redirect from the shoulder, hand, wrist, or arm, or along the back in order for them to walk safely to a location. Mechanical restraint. The use of any device or equipment to resist a student's freedom of movement. The term does not include devices implemented by training school personnel or utilized by a student that have been prescribed by an appropriate medical or related service professional and are used for the specific and approved purposes for which such devices are designed, such as adaptive devices or mechanical supports used to achieve proper body position, balance, and alignment to allow greater freedom of mobility than would be possible without the use of such devices or mechanical supports. You'll often see these in self-contained rooms where the student has intensive physical concerns and the PT works closely with them with specific devices in order to assist them to be in the standing position or in the sitting position. That is not a mechanical restraint. Vehicle safety restraints when used as intended during transport of a student in a moving vehicle. That's like a seatbelt. Those are okay. Restraints for medical immobilization or orthopedically prescribed devices. Physical restraint requirements. Only used in a situation required immediate intervention where reasonable physical force is needed to prevent imminent danger or serious physical harm to a student or others. I really want to go back and emphasize something. Imminent danger or of serious physical harm. I am not kidding when I say it has to be imminent danger, not just to make the situation easier to handle. It really has to be imminent danger. When we fill out forms about this, that is the very first question. Can anything else have been done before you get to this? So, imminent danger. So, physical restraint requirements. Least restrictive restraint should be used and immediately discontinued as soon as the imminent danger has resolved. Never used in a way that would restrict the student's ability to breathe or communicate or cause harm to a student. Prone restraint is prohibited. Remember, prone is anything laying down. Cannot be used in a planned intervention on an IEP, Section 504 plans, BIPs, or other plans. Cannot be used to prevent property damage unless there is also imminent danger or serious physical harm to the student or others. Only staff trained in accordance with the regulations can administer physical restraints. After a physical restraint is used, the student must be evaluated by a school nurse or other medical personnel to determine document any injuries resulting from the incident. Let's just hold up here on this slide for a second. We got to talk about a few things. There are only a handful of people in the building that are trained in what we use, which is CPI, Crisis Prevention Intervention, physical restraint training. If you are not one of those people and have not gone through a 2-day training to do this, you are not allowed to do any of these things, right? You would be calling for help to find someone who is capable of doing these things. Even when those people arrive, they may not be doing a restraint. It's highly likely that they will. They will use other de-escalation techniques in order to not put a child in a restraint hold. It is very labor intensive and is very traumatizing for both the student and the adult, and at all costs we do not use physical restraint. We have used very little in our district in the past few years, and that's something to be very proud of, that we're very good at de-escalating a student. Also, even when we cannot de-escalate the student and the student is, let's just say, tearing up a room, New York State regulations now support the fact that that is what is going to happen, okay? Unless there is imminent danger of them jumping out a window or seriously harming themselves by the item that they've picked up, that we are not going to intervene at that point. We will find other ways to de-escalate them and calm them down before we would restrain them. Timeout. We do not have any official timeout rooms in our district, but we will talk about them. The monitored separation of a student in a non-lock setting that is implemented for the purpose of de-escalation, regaining control, and preparing a student to meet expectations to return to their education program. It does not include student-initiated or student-requested break. The use of a room or a space containing tools and activities to assist a student to calm, or to the use of such intervention strategies consistent with a student with disabilities behavior intervention plan as defined in section 200.1 of this title. A teacher removal of in-school suspension or any other appropriate disciplinary action. The student shall be returned to their educational program as soon as they have safely de-escalated, regained control, are prepared to meet expectations. Must be used in conjunction with an IEP except for situations that create an immediate concern for the physical safety of a student or others. So that would mean that if we had a timeout room, official timeout room, that it have to be part of the students. That we have very few students that have BIPs connected to their IEPs. And even less of those students actually have issues with physical violence that's so severe or escalating that we would even consider this being on their BIP at all. So once again, that's why I say we have to know about it, but we do not participate in this. Seclusion. Seclusion, the involuntary confinement of a student alone in a room or a space that they are physically prevented from leaving, and they may perceive that they cannot leave at will. This does not include timeout as defined in the regulations. Seclusion is prohibited. That's just completely prohibited. We can never leave a student alone in a room, This is like those scenarios where a kid has been locked in a small room and an adult sits outside. Just cannot happen. Timeout and physical restraint limitations. The amended regulations require the use of positive, proactive, evidence, and research-based strategies to reduce challenging behaviors for the purpose of eliminating the need for timeout and physical restraints. Should include multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. Timeout and physical restraint should only be used when a less restrictive and instructive interventions and de-escalation techniques would not prevent imminent danger of serious physical harm to the student or others. There is no known medical contraindications, and that just means that there's nothing medically wrong with the student. If there's anything medically wrong with the student that would cause us to not want to ever use physical restraint with them because they have medical concerns. And the staff have required training to use such interventions. That's what we talked about. You must be CPI trained, and there's just a handful of us in the district that are. Timeout room requirements. Once again, we don't have a timeout room, but here are the requirements. Timeout rooms may be within or outside a classroom and must comply to the following: be unlocked and able to be opened from the inside. Provide the means for continuous visual and auditory monitoring of the student. Staff shall continuously monitor a student in a timeout room. Be of adequate length, and height to allow a student to move about and recline comfortably. Be clean and free of objects and fixtures that could be potentially dangerous to a student. Wall and floor coverings should be designed to prevent injury to the student, and there shall be adequate lighting and ventilation. The temperature of the room shall be within the normal range and consistent with the rest of the building. Adversive interventions. The intervention that is intended to induce pain or discomfort to the student for the purpose of eliminating or reducing maladaptive behaviors, including such interventions as contingent application of a noxious, painful, intrusive stimuli or activity. Now, guys, we're talking about these because we cannot do these. These are not okay things to do. We're listing them all. They are not okay. Any form of contingent food program that includes the denial or delay of a provision of a meal or intentionally altering staple foods or drinks to make it distasteful. Movement limitations used as a punishment, including but not limited to helmets, mechanical restraint devices, or other stimuli or actions similar to the interventions described above. Does not include interventions such as voice control, limited to loud, firm commands, time limiting ignoring for specific behaviors, token fines as part of a token economy. So these are things you can do. You can speak firmly. You can limit time ignoring certain behaviors, trying to get them to extinguish themselves. You can have a token economy where a token is taken away for behaviors that you don't want seen. It's not my favorite way of doing it, but they're not restricting you from doing it. Brief physical prompts to interrupt or prevent a specific behavior. Interventions medically necessary for the treatment or protection of the student, or other similar actions. Corporal punishment. Any act of physical force upon a student for the purpose of punishing that student. It does not include the use of physical restraints for the purpose of protecting the student, another student, teacher, or any person from physical injury when alternative methods not involving the purpose of physical restraint cannot reasonably be employed to achieve these purposes. So what is it saying? Absolutely no corporal punishment. It's completely prohibitive. But they are saying that physical restraint, when in extreme situations to keep for the safety of the student or themselves, that is not corporal punishment. That is for safety. Parental notification. The same-day notification to parents/guardians following the use of a timeout or a physical restraint, even when in conjunction with a BIP. If a student with an IEP has a BIP and they on occasion need a physical restraint, there also would be a crisis plan that was connected to that BIP saying that this may happen due to their extreme outbursts, that there may be, after the use of de-escalation techniques, that there may have to be a step
where we use physical restraint. So that would be outlined specifically in the student's BIP document with a crisis plan attached to it. So you would know if you had a student that had a BIP that also had a crisis plan that may involve the use of physical restraint if needed. Right now, there are very few kids in our district that have a crisis plan connected to their BIP, and you would know it if you had a student that needed that. But that being said, if we ever have to use a physical restraint, we would never use a timeout. We don't have those rooms. But if we do have to use a physical restraint on a student, we are required to notify the parent. So if unsuccessful, document all reasonable attempts of contact and notify the CSE. Notification must include offer to the parent or guardian to meet regarding the incident. Parents and guardians must be provided with a copy of documentation of the incident within 3 school days. We absolutely would be doing all these things. These are already protocols we have in place. This is not new to us in our district. This is a process that we already do effectively and efficiently.
Required documentation maintained by the school for each incident involving the use of a timeout or a physical restraint, and be available to review the SED upon request. It needs to include name, date of birth of the student, setting and location of the incident, staff who participated in the implementation, monitoring, and supervision of the timeout or the physical restraint, or any others involved, the description of the incident, including the duration, and for the physical restraint, the type of restraint used. If student has an IEP, Section 504 plan, BIP, or other plan, all positive proactive intervention strategies used prior to the timeout or physical restraint, and if such strategies were in line with any applicable BIPs. Details of any injuries to student or staff during the incident, and if the student was evaluated by the school nurse or medical personnel. Date and method of notification to the parents and guardians, and whether a meeting was held.
Debriefing. After each incident, a debriefing must be held as soon as practicable, in which a school administrator or designee is present. Meets with the school staff involved in the incident to determine circumstances leading to it, the positive proactive strategies used prior to the incident, and the plan for reducing, preventing future need for timeout and/or physical restraint with the student. For students with a disability, this includes determining if a referral to the review of the IEP and/or BIP is necessary. Direct school staff member to discuss the incident with the student in a manner appropriate to the student's age and developmental ability, and to discuss the behaviors, if any, that precipitated the use of the timeout and/or physical restraint. Debriefing is super important, guys, not only for the staff, but for the student. We always want to make sure whenever there is the use of physical restraint that we are always looking for the best possible way to not have to use that as a tool again. So that we're always looking at which part of the de-escalation portion could we have maybe made adjustments or changed, or we are always looking for how can we not get involved in a physical restraint again. We also want to make sure that staff is okay, that staff is feeling supported, and that we are also here to make sure that that student is safe. It is a very traumatic thing when you have to put a student into a physical restraint, and we want to do that as the least amount humanly possible, and we are quite successful at not using physical restraint, which I am super proud of. And even when incidents may take long to de-escalate, we still are not at the portion where we're having to use physical restraint, which is very, very good.
Documentation review and training. The school administrator and designee is required to regularly review the documentation on the use of timeout and physical restraints to ensure compliance with the policy and procedures. If there are multiple incidents with the same classroom or involving the same staff, appropriate steps need to be taken to address the frequency and pattern of use. All staff are required to receive annual training, the policies and procedures for the use of timeout and physical restraint, evidence-based positive proactive strategies, crisis intervention and prevention procedures, and de-escalation techniques. Any staff who may need to implement timeout and physical restraint are required to receive annual evidence-based training in safe and effective developmentally appropriate timeout and physical restraint procedures. District policy review. You're required to review the district policy regarding restraint, seclusion, and timeout annually. Should you have any questions after review, please follow up with an administrator. Okay, we're on to the next section, which is understanding behavior and de-escalation strategies. So what we want to look at is behavior is a form of communication. I know you've all heard this. Behavior is a form of communication. All behaviors you do in your life is communicating something to the world around you, right? Unfortunately, behavior is oftentimes deemed as a negative word, but everything you do is behavior. So let's just look at some of the categories that we look at. So the functions. So attention. One of the reasons we do behavior is to get attention. And the other one is to escape or avoid something. So attention from staff or a preferred adult, attention from a peer, attention to a location or access to a location, access to an object or an activity, or access to food and drink. Oftentimes people may also say that's a tangible item that you're trying to attend to. So you're trying to get the sucker from mom at Walmart. You're trying to get the toy from your friend. So attention is one reason that we do any behavior. The other one is escape or to avoid. So to avoid a task or activity, to escape from pain, to avoid a specific person, staff or adult or peer, to escape or avoid a specific environment or environmental factors such as noise and lighting. So we call it the ABCs of behavior. So the A is antecedent, the B is behavior, the C is consequences. The behavior sits in the center there. Antecedent is what happens before the behavior. And when I say before, I mean within the minute before the behavior. What happened in that minute before the behavior? Sometimes I say even 10 seconds before the behavior, what was happening? And behavior is what the person does, the behavior engaged in that can be studied. What that actually means is, what do you see? It's not about what you think the person's doing, what behavior you can see happening. And consequence is what happens after the behavior being studied. So consequence, sometimes consequence people think like, what punishment is that kid getting for doing that thing? That's not always what consequence is. Consequence is the thing that happens immediately after the behavior happens. So the kid is screaming and yelling, immediately the kid is given a task like do this math page. They begin screaming and yelling and screaming and yelling. Immediately the teacher goes over and says, you don't have to do this, you can put your head down. So the consequence really was they got to escape the task by screaming and yelling, right? Maybe later they have to do it during recess, but the true consequence right away is they got to escape because they screamed and yelled. Desirable behavior. Desirable behaviors are the behaviors that are encouraged and the behaviors we desire to see. These are the behaviors we teach. Reinforcement can be used to strengthen desirable behaviors. Challenging behaviors. Challenging behaviors are the behaviors that we want to minimize or extinguish. Challenging behaviors can be the result of lagging skills. So this is a great picture of child's behavior is not always what it seems. Behavior is communication. What we see, the behavior, what we don't see, what's under the surface. Executive functions, needs for connection, emotional, self-esteem. It needs some power, needs attention, needs to build social skills, insecurities, securities, thoughts, basic needs. These are what we call precipitating factors in behaviors. Observe for early warning signs and triggers. Observe for early warning signs and or triggers. For students who repeatedly engage in undesired behaviors, early warning signs and or triggers are typically identifiable. Early intervention and de-escalation can help to prevent escalation in undesired behaviors. Observable such as signs of agitation, whining, yelling, refusing, swatting, hitting, ripping up papers, pushing materials around may be early signs. Putting my head down, refusing to sit in my seat, refusing to enter the room. These are all early signs. Use a direct or concise communication with clear choices and clarified boundaries for the desired behavior. Would you like to talk about this now or later in private? Would you like to do option A or option B? If you stop yelling, then I can answer your question. If you stop pushing your materials on the floor, I can help you solve a problem, right? So we always want to do that in a calm voice. We never want to meet the behavior at the same level that the child is presenting it. We always want to be the person that is calm, cool, and collected. Unintended consequence in the behavior trap. Reinforcement of challenging behavior can get a behavior to stop, may unintentionally reinforce the behavior. The frequency of the behavior often increases in the future. Example of an unintended consequence behavior trap. So, student Joey does not want to write. Joey screams. The staff member talks to Joey. Joey screams. The staff member talks to Joey. Joey stops. The staff reinforces Joey's behavior of yelling by talking to him. Joey reinforces staff behavior of talking to him as he stops screaming. So it's like a loop that you can get in, so you just have to be conscious of what's the reinforcer there. They got out of it. And then now Joey, after being talked to, he stops screaming. So you kind of get in that cycle of attending to it. He really wanted attention. It might not have been escape behavior. That's understanding the function of the behavior. So you can sometimes get in this trap when you don't understand what the real function of the behavior is. You're thinking it's about writing. He just wants attention. You give him attention. Now he stops, but you're in a loop with him that you may not know how to get out of or even understand how it got created. Strategies to promote or ensure safety. Call for assistance if needed. Use your district's protocol. Provide time and space to the escalated student. Identify the adult individual who is in the lead. This means when you have a student who is engaging in extreme behavior, only one person should be talking to that student. There may be 4 of you standing there, but only one person is going to engage with that student. Remove individuals who may be in harm's way. That sometimes means moving the classroom, or moving other adults out. Using nonverbal cues. Use distraction. Execute pre-established plan to de-escalate. It's using some CPI strategies. Remove dangerous objects from the environment. Communicate in a respectful manner. It's using calm tone and not being sarcastic. Promote student dignity. Be aware of exits and be prepared to exit if necessary. There's a lot in this slide. This slide the bullet points are filled with things. Let's just go back to one of them right now. Remove dangerous objects in the environment. I am the type of person who, when called or stepping in, I'm immediately assessing what's around me. Where are the scissors? I got to take my lanyard off. I wore a really sharp ring today. I'm taking it off and putting it in my pocket. I'm looking at what books are around them. Oftentimes while I'm talking to them and they're agitated, I may be quietly and not making a big deal about it at all, removing stuff from their desk and not saying, I'm taking this away from you because you don't look. No, I'm just quietly making sure the space. I'll be looking at the other adults around and giving them that nonverbal cue, like, can you move that chair away? Like I'm giving them that look and they move the chair back just to make sure that we're getting safer and safer, very quietly. And once again, with dignity. I'm not doing it sarcastically. I'm not telling them what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make the environment safe for them. The goals of de-escalation: maintain the safety of the student and all other individuals. Use de-escalation strategies and nonverbal communication to avoid heightening the situation. Support student to decrease behaviors and intensify the crisis. Avoid reinforcement and unintended reinforcement of the behavior. So some ways that we do this. We're going to give choice. Would you like to go in the hall? Or would you like to go on a walk with me, right? Would you like to do the evens of this? Or would you like to do it during recess today, right? Choices that as an adult we can live with, right? Listen and repeat what was said. I hear you're agitated. I hear you're angry today. You want to tell me about it, right? So you want to acknowledging them. Always be calm. No matter how escalated the situation is, you need to come with it with the most calm body and calm mind. I always say, before I walk into a situation, I take deep breaths myself because I need to make sure that I am prepared to walk in there and be the calmest one in the room, even in the midst of the crisis, because there are decisions that need to be made. They need to be made with a calm mind. And also that student needs to know, I need to calm down to the level that you're at because that's where I'm at, right? Give space and wait time. Do not rapid fire questions at them, right? Or rapid fire demands when they're escalated. You want to just be calm and say, like, hey, I'd love to talk with you when you're ready. And then be quiet for a while. Be quiet. Maybe in a minute, would you like to get up and walk out? But give time. Change the subject to a positive one. Oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with younger kids, they can be easily distracted in a escalated situation. So they may be completely, I always say, losing their crackers, right? But all of a sudden I'd be like, did you see Bluey yesterday? Oh my gosh, that episode was so funny. And they love Bluey, right? Or all of a sudden start talking about the Bills. They're easily distracted. Or, did you see your friend brought a football today to school? I wonder if he's playing with that at recess. Because there are some kids that just that distraction is enough to get them moving in the right direction. De-escalation strategies. Be calm. Speak softly, even if the student is loud, and that is so hard. So many adults meet with the same intensity, and that's not okay, especially as the kids get older. You want to reinforce desirable behaviors and avoid reinforcing behaviors that are disruptive or dangerous. Avoid talking too much. Avoid power struggles. Maintain a distance. And the reason you want to maintain a distance is if they decide they're going to swing or kick, you need to be safe. We have what's called a supportive stance, where you actually kind of make yourself smaller by standing sideways and putting weight on your back foot, turning your shoulders. It makes you less threatening, and it also gives you distance between you and the student at that point. This is what I talk about when I'm ready to walk into a room. I start removing jewelry, my ID badge, my necklace, my earrings. I'll put my hair up in a ponytail, and sometimes not even a ponytail, into a bun. It's harder to grab my hair at that point. Just all those things, to the point where anyone who sees me come into a room, I always wear sneakers now. I've worn sneakers for 20 years because sneakers have tread on them. And if I ever have to run with a student, which is never good for me because I'm not a great runner, but if I do have to do a hold on any student, I have the right shoes on. I always wear pants. It's kind of funny that it's just I always come prepared to be ready to help someone. So I always have pants on, I always have sneakers on, and I always have pants with pockets so that I can unload all those items. I typically never wear rings anymore, and I wear very small earrings, all for those because I never know when I might need to help someone. So I'm always ready to step in and help. The power of positive language. The power of positive language, do versus don't. Staff reactions and responses have the power of influencing behavior. You can take a deep breath. You need to take deep breaths. You need to use quiet, soft voice. You need to put your materials in the basket on the desk versus don't yell, stop yelling. Don't throw your materials. Don't run around this classroom. Don't go in the hall, right? You want to just say positive, affirmative directives that you want done. Very short, very sweet, and you keep it simple. Some resources. The cycle of crisis to calm and strategies to implement by stage. So right here, this is kind of a very crazy little drawing, but the crisis de-escalation to calm. You want to remove demands from that person. You want to give them wait time. You want to give them space. You want to do intentional distractions if that's a kiddo that you know well enough and you know by distracting them that you're going to get them. Give choices. Give choices you can live with, right? Would you like to go in the calming area, or would you like to take a walk with me, right? 2 choices you can live with. Would you like to go sit at your desk, or would you like to go see Mrs. Smith? Two choices you can live with. If you get up into your desk, then I can help you with your spelling, right? Or when you come stand in line, then we can go get your lunch, right? Very short, very sweet. Always be calm, neutral, non-reactive. No matter how crazy it gets, you cannot be reactive. Call for assistance when you need it. Never let it go too far, right? Never let it go too far. Use nonverbals. You can interrupt and redirect. Ask open-ended questions. It gets them thinking sometimes. Reestablish expectations and reintegration when they're calm. This is all a big cycle. We use this all the time. Like when we get to reestablish expectations and reintegration is much like what we do with our restorative practices. How can we get us reintegrated back in calmly, safely, and ready to learn? Checklist for proactive and de-escalation strategies implemented following a crisis or an intervention. So we're just going to read through them all, right? Proactive and de-escalation strategies, and then I'll go back and hit on some of them that maybe we haven't talked about yet. Proactive interventions and de-escalation strategies use classroom management plan, a well-managed classroom with structure, oftentimes can be the best deterrent for escalating behaviors. Environmental management, removed and reduced triggers. If you know you've got a kid that can't manage scissors well, why are the scissors out on the table, right? They should be in a cabinet that's locked. Then you don't even have the opportunity to use them inappropriately because they're not available, right? Or a kid that can't handle the markers, they're going to start throwing them. Put the markers away. Even though for 30 years you've had markers out in your room and they've been safe, well, maybe not this year, right? Differential reinforcement, frequent, random, and structured. So always be reinforcing the behaviors you want to see. Those desirable behaviors, you want to be reinforcing them 5 times more than all those challenging behaviors. We don't want kids to live in a desert that lacks reinforcement. So really think about that. Interrupt and redirect. We talked about that. Intentional distractions. Very, very useful, especially when you have a good relationship with that kid and you understand what they like. You can oftentimes easily distract them. I have a wonderful young man who loves the planets, and in the midst of his biggest crises, I can just walk in and say to him things like, oh my gosh, I was watching a show last night about Neptune. I didn't realize that Neptune had so many moons. And he'll look at me and he'll be like, I know. And then all of a sudden he'll walk away with me talking about the planets, and everyone's like, what just happened? Well, I was able to intentionally distract him, and I'm able to move him that way and get him out of the room, and the kid gets to leave with dignity, and he doesn't even realize it happened. But that's from building big relationships with kiddos that have big challenges. When and then statements, if then statements, intervention provided by a counselor, social worker, or school psychologist. Those are oftentimes come through MTSS, or if the child has a BIP. When you call for assistance, remove the audience. Remove the audience might be removing them from the classroom or removing them from the playground, any one of those types of things. Remove demands. That's whatever's happening at the time, just remove the demand. I'm going to tell you at that moment, the demand does not matter. Safety of the student, safety of yourself. So I know you may really want that kid to finish that spelling test and you're upset because that is the demand at the time. Everyone else did it, yada, yada, yada. At that moment, you're going to be like, we're not doing the spelling test right now. We're going to work through this. You can put that demand back on them when they're calm and maybe you've moved on. But at this moment, remove that demand immediately to get that child to de-escalate and get you to an area of safety as fast as you can. Open-ended questions. Once again, we talked about those. Get them thinking. Provide acceptable choices. Those are choices you can live with. I always like to keep it 2. Prompted to engage to a safer behavior. That's, remember, using directives that aren't no's. You're saying, please sit quietly. Not like, don't lay down, right? Please sit up, right? Provided personal space, time, and silence. Some kids just need a moment. And as adults, we forget that they just need a moment. Even us as adults need a moment. Give the kids a moment. Okay? I know that I have to get up and walk away from stressful situations. I need to go take a walk outside. I need to go in my room and close my door and sort of be angry about it for a little while. Kids need the same kind of time and space and silence. Do we have to give it to them with supervision? But we can give it with dignity and honor and give them a moment, ask them how they want it, and then redirect them back. Provided nonverbals. Nonverbals are things like, maybe not demanding sitting, but showing the sitting, pointing at the appropriate place to be, those kind of things where it's not as intrusive to them, but you're using your body language and directives nonverbally.
So this concludes our presentation of the New York State mandated PD. For this presentation, there is a form that you need to fill out. There is a link below, which hopefully you're able to access. I do believe also that we are going to possibly put it in Salamanca's PD, that you can connect from there, or we'll put it on Schoology and you're able to connect that link. By completing the form, it should be proof that you participated and listened to this presentation. It is very quick. It's 5 questions, and that should be enough. So I want to thank you all. And if you have any questions about anything that you have listened to today, I'm going to give you a couple tips. One is you can find myself, Kim Spillane, the District Behavior Specialist, and ask me anything you would like to know. Chris Myers is available, and Jeff Schneider. Chris will continue to be our CPI trainer along with myself. We're adding a couple other trainers as we go along this year. Jeff is stepping aside, but will be a great resource at Prospect for anyone who would like to ask him any questions. I'm sure he will oblige you that. So please go and fill this form out, and please come and find us. Also, too, be watching for PDs in our Salamanca portal, because I will be offering, and Chris will be offering, some de-escalation trainings, and also myself will be offering some varied hour-long PDs after school on topics of behavior. Thank you.